The papers were already signed when everyone in the room started laughing. The woman behind the county office desk looked at the contract one more time, then slowly lifted her eyes toward the man standing in front of her. "Sir, are you absolutely sure about this?" The man did not answer immediately. Through the old office window, he could see the land stretching far beyond the parking lot, a place most people avoided, a place covered with dark water, wild grass, and twisted trees. A place the town had spent decades trying to forget. He looked down at the photograph in his hand, a faded picture of a young black boy standing beside an older man near the edge of that same swamp. The boy was him, the older man was his father, and after 30 years, that piece of forgotten land was the only thing left connecting him to a promise he never understood. "Yes," he finally said, "I'm sure." The woman slowly pushed the papers toward him. "You know nobody wants this property, right?" He picked up the pen. "I know. It has no buildings, no road access, no business value." The man looked toward the window again. "I know," she lowered her voice. "Then why buy it?" His fingers touched the old photograph because some things were worth more than money, but he did not say that. He simply signed his name, Daniel Carter, 42 years old, born and raised in a small town in Georgia, a man who spent his entire life repairing things other people gave up on, broken engines, old machines, damaged tools. Anything people thought was finished somehow found its way into Daniel's small repair shop. And somehow he always found a way to bring it back. But lately Daniel had been struggling to repair something much bigger, his own life. His repair shop was barely surviving. The roof leaked whenever it rained. The old machines inside were older than some of his customers. The paint on the front sign had faded years ago. But every morning Daniel still unlocked the door. Every morning he turned on the lights. Every morning he sat for 5 quiet minutes in the same wooden chair near the window, a chair that belonged to his father, Thomas Carter, the man who taught Daniel one lesson before he ever taught him how to use a tool. Never throw something away just because you don't understand its value. Daniel was 12 years old when he first heard those words. He still remembered that afternoon. The sun was dropping behind the trees. The air smelled like rain. His father had taken him deep into the swamp outside town. At the time, Daniel did not understand why. The place was not beautiful, it was not peaceful, it was just wet ground, tall grass, and endless silence. But his father walked through it like he was entering a church, carefully, respectfully, like the land was telling him something. That day, Thomas gave Daniel a small metal box. Inside was an old notebook. The pages were yellow, the handwriting was rough. Daniel remembered opening it and seeing drawings of plants, strange measurements, and notes about the land. "What is this?" young Daniel asked. His father smiled. "Something unfinished." That was all he said. Months later, Thomas became sick, and before Daniel was old enough to understand what was happening, his father was gone. The notebook disappeared into a drawer. Life moved forward. Daniel grew older. He built a family. He worked long hours. He watched his children grow up. He experienced success. He experienced failure. And eventually, after years of ignoring the past, he found that old notebook again. The first pages seemed ordinary, weather notes, plant sketches, small observations, but near the end, Daniel found something that changed everything. A hand-drawn map, a circle marked deep inside the swamp, and one sentence written beneath it. "The land is hiding something." Daniel read those words again and again. He did not know what his father had discovered. He did not know why he spent years studying that forgotten place. But he knew one thing. His father had never been searching for nothing. That was why Daniel bought the swamp, not because he was wealthy, not because he had a plan, because he needed answers. But 3 weeks after buying the property, Daniel realized something. The swamp was not empty. It was waiting. Every morning he walked deeper into the land. Mud covered his boots. Mosquitoes followed him. The heat made every step harder. His equipment broke constantly, and every night he returned to his small house covered in dirt and exhaustion. People in town watched him. Some laughed, some shook their heads, some called him crazy. One neighbor even stopped by and said, "Daniel, your father was a good man, but maybe he was wrong about this place." Daniel looked past him toward the dark trees. Maybe his father had been wrong. Maybe he had spent his savings chasing a memory. Maybe everyone else was right. Then one evening, while repairing a broken shovel near the old house on the property, Daniel noticed something strange. A loose wooden board beneath the floor moved slightly. He stopped. The room became silent. Slowly, he pulled the board upward. Underneath was something hidden for decades, a small wooden key, and carved into the surface were two words, "Find below." Daniel stared at it, because he knew immediately his father had left something behind, something he never found. Something someone had tried to hide. And for the first time since buying the swamp, Daniel wondered if the land was not hiding a secret. Maybe it was protecting one. The small wooden key rested in Daniel Carter's palm for almost 10 minutes. He did not move. He did not speak. He simply stood inside the old farmhouse, staring at the tiny object as rain tapped against the cracked windows. The room smelled like dust, old wood, and memories, a place that had been empty for years. A place his father once walked through, and now somehow a hidden key was waiting beneath the floor. Daniel turned it slowly between his fingers. The wood was old, the edges were worn, but whoever placed it there wanted someone to find it, and they wanted that person to know exactly where to look. "Find below." The word stayed in his mind. Below what? The house, the swamp, the ground itself. Daniel grabbed the old notebook from the table and opened it again. He placed the wooden key beside the final pages. For the first time, he noticed something he had missed before. A small drawing near the bottom corner. It looked like a door. Underneath it was the same circle from the map. The same location marked deep inside the swamp. Daniel slowly closed the notebook. His father had not just been exploring the land. He had been searching for something hidden beneath it. The next morning, before sunrise, Daniel was already outside. The sky was still dark. A cold morning fog covered the swamp. Water droplets hung from the tall grass. The entire land looked different in the early light, quiet, almost untouched. Daniel carried a shovel, a flashlight, and the old notebook inside a waterproof bag. He followed the map, one step at a time. The deeper he walked, the less familiar the land became. The path disappeared. The trees became thicker. The ground became softer. Several times his boots sank into the mud, but he continued. Because for the first time in years, he felt close to his father. After almost 2 hours, Daniel reached the marked location. He looked around, nothing, only trees, water, and silence. He checked the map again, then he looked down. A strange feeling moved through him. He remembered something his father once told him. Sometimes the biggest things are hidden under the smallest signs. Daniel looked carefully at the ground. Near an old fallen tree, he noticed something unusual. A line, almost invisible. A shape covered by dirt and moss. His heart started beating faster. He dropped to his knees. Using his hands, he cleared away the wet soil. Slowly, a metal surface appeared. A door, not a normal door, an old steel door built directly into the earth. Daniel sat back for a moment. The swamp around him was completely silent. No birds, no wind, nothing, almost like the land itself was waiting. He reached for the wooden key. His fingers touched the old metal lock, but before he could insert the key, a sound came from behind him, a vehicle. Daniel quickly stood. A black SUV moved slowly along the rough path he created near the property. The vehicle stopped. The door opened. A man stepped out, clean jacket, expensive shoes, a watch that probably cost more than Daniel's truck. The man looked around the swamp like he had been there before. Then his eyes moved toward the hidden door, and Daniel noticed something. The man was not surprised. He was worried. "My name is Richard Hale," the man said. Daniel did not lower his guard. "How do you know about this?" Richard looked at the steel door. "I was hoping you wouldn't find it." The words created a strange silence. Daniel stepped closer. "You knew this was here?" Richard looked away. "My father knew your father." The wind moved through the trees. Daniel tightened his grip on the key. "My father never mentioned you." Richard nodded. "That doesn't surprise me." "Why?" Richard looked toward the water. Because your father believed some things were safer when fewer people knew about them. Daniel studied his face. You're not here because you're worried about me. Richard said nothing. That silence was enough. Daniel understood. What do you want? Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. He held it out. Inside was a check, a very large one. Daniel looked at the number, more money than he had made in several years. You want me to sell? Richard nodded. Take the money, walk away. Start over. Daniel looked at the check. For a second he imagined it. No more struggling, no more broken equipment, no more wondering if he made the biggest mistake of his life. He could fix his shop, he could help his family, he could finally breathe. Then he looked back at the steel door, at the place his father spent years studying, and he handed the envelope back. No, Richard's expression changed. You don't know what's under that door. Daniel looked at him. Neither do you. For the first time, Richard looked uncomfortable. And that reaction told Daniel everything. Richard knew something important, something he was not saying. Richard stepped closer. You think you found an opportunity? He looked around the swamp. But sometimes finding something buried doesn't mean you were meant to uncover it. Then he turned and walked back toward his vehicle. Before leaving, he stopped. Without looking back, he said, ask yourself why your father never opened that door. The SUV disappeared through the trees. Daniel remained standing alone. The envelope was gone, the offer was gone, but the questions remained. Why had his father hidden the door? Why had Richard tried to buy the land? And what was important enough for two families to protect for decades? Daniel looked down at the steel entrance, then slowly placed the wooden key into the lock. It turned. The sound echoed through the swamp, a deep metallic click. The door opened. Cold air rushed upward from the darkness below. Daniel lifted his flashlight, and what he saw beneath the earth was something his father had spent his entire life trying to protect. Something that would change everything. The cold air rising from beneath the swamp felt like it had been trapped there for decades. Daniel Carter stood at the entrance, holding the flashlight tightly in his hand. For a moment, he thought about closing the door, walking away, pretending he never found it, because some secrets were easier to leave buried. But then he remembered his father's voice. Never throw something away just because you don't understand its value. Daniel stepped inside. The steel door slowly closed behind him. The sound echoed through the underground tunnel. Boom, boom, boom. Each step became louder in the darkness. The walls were old stone, not natural stone. Someone had built this place. Someone had spent time creating it. The beam from Daniel's flashlight moved across the walls. There were marks everywhere, numbers, drawings, notes. Father's handwriting. Daniel stopped. His chest tightened. For years, he wondered if he remembered his father correctly, if maybe time had changed the memories. But seeing those words on the wall made everything real again. Thomas Carter had been here. He had stood in the same place. He had touched the same stones. Daniel moved forward. At the end of the tunnel was a small underground room. It was not filled with gold. There were no expensive objects, no hidden treasure, just a simple wooden table. An old chair, a broken lantern, and dozens of papers carefully protected inside glass containers. Daniel walked closer. His flashlight landed on the first page, a drawing of a plant he had seen many times in his father's notebook, but this time there were detailed notes beside it. Scientific notes, research, measurements. Daniel picked up one of the papers. His eyes moved across the faded writing. His father had discovered something rare, something almost nobody knew existed. The swamp was home to a unique plant species that had survived for generations. A plant that grew only in this specific environment. A plant that scientists had been searching for. Daniel looked around the room. Suddenly, the swamp did not feel empty anymore. It felt alive. His father was never looking for money. He was protecting something, a living piece of nature, a secret that could disappear forever if the wrong people found it. Then Daniel noticed another document. A newspaper clipping from 25 years earlier. The headline caught his attention. Local research project canceled after land dispute. Daniel read the article carefully. A company had tried to purchase the swamp years ago. His father had fought against them, but nobody in town knew why. At the bottom of the article was a name, Hale Industries, Richard's family. Daniel slowly placed the paper down. Now he understood. Richard's father knew. The Hale family had known about this place for years. The question was, why did they wait until now? Daniel searched through the room. Then he found something hidden beneath the wooden table, a small metal box. The same type of box his father had given him as a child. His hands became still. Slowly, he opened it. Inside was another notebook, but this one was different. It was written directly to him. Daniel sat down. The old chair creaked beneath his weight. He opened the first page. Daniel, just one word, his father's handwriting. His eyes became heavy. If you are reading this, then you found what I could not finish. Daniel stopped. The room became quiet. He continued reading. I wanted to protect this place, but protecting something alone is impossible. One day, someone will need to decide what happens next. Daniel looked around the underground room. For years, he thought he was searching for answers. But now he realized his father had left him a responsibility, not a discovery, a choice. He continued reading. Do not let this become another thing people fight over. This land is valuable because it gives life, not because it can make someone rich. Daniel closed the notebook. A tear slowly moved down his face, not because he was sad, because after all these years, he finally understood his father. The man who seemed obsessed with a forgotten swamp was never chasing a dream. He was protecting a future. But before Daniel could leave, he heard something, a sound above him, footsteps. Someone else was near the entrance. Daniel turned off the flashlight. The underground room disappeared into darkness. He stayed completely still. The footsteps became louder. Someone had followed him. Someone knew he opened the door. Daniel held the notebook close to his chest. Then a voice echoed from the tunnel. Daniel, he recognized it immediately. Richard Hale. But this time, Richard did not sound angry. He sounded afraid. Whatever you found down there, a pause. Don't let them take it. Daniel stepped forward. What are you talking about? Richard appeared at the entrance. His face was different now. No confidence, no control, just fear, because Daniel finally realized something. Richard Hale was not the biggest threat. He was warning him about someone else. Someone who had been waiting for this discovery. Someone who wanted the swamp for a reason neither of them understood yet. For the first time since Daniel Carter stepped onto the swamp, he saw fear in Richard Hale's eyes. Not anger, not greed, fear. The kind of fear that came from knowing something was much bigger than yourself. Daniel kept the old notebook pressed against his chest. The underground room was silent except for the slow dripping of water from the stone ceiling. Who are they? Daniel asked. Richard looked down at the floor. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he walked inside. I spent years trying to find this place, Richard said quietly. Daniel watched him carefully. And now you're telling me I should protect it. Richard looked at the walls covered with his father's notes. Because I finally understand what my father was trying to do. The flashlight moved across Richard's face. He looked older than he did a few minutes ago. The confidence was gone, the expensive suit, the powerful businessman image, all gone. Standing inside that hidden room, he was just a son carrying a family mistake. My father knew about this land, Richard said. Years ago, he wanted to buy it. Daniel looked at the papers. Why? Richard took a deep breath. Because he saw what was here. A rare resource, a discovery that could change industries, a discovery worth millions. But Thomas Carter saw something else. He saw a living ecosystem, a place that had survived because nobody touched it. Richard's father did not see protection. He saw opportunity. And when Thomas refused to sell, the Hale family started looking for other ways. Daniel's jaw tightened. So your family tried to take it. Richard looked away. Yes, the answer was simple, and that honesty surprised Daniel. For years, Daniel had imagined Richard as a villain, a rich man who only wanted control. But now he saw something more complicated, a man who inherited a mistake and spent years repeating it. What changed? Daniel asked. Richard looked toward the tunnel entrance. My father died 6 months ago. Silence. Before he died, he gave me a letter. Richard reached into his pocket. Pulled out an old folded piece of paper. He told me something I never expected. Daniel stared at him. What? Richard opened the letter. My father wrote, the Carter boy was right. Daniel froze. The Carter boy, his father. Richard continued. He spent his whole life trying to own something your father was willing to protect. The words stayed in the air, then a loud sound interrupted them. A vehicle outside. Both men looked toward the tunnel. Richard's face changed immediately. They found us. Daniel turned off the flashlight. What do we do? Richard looked at the notebook in Daniel's hand. Hide it. They moved quickly. The underground room suddenly felt smaller. Daniel placed the notebook inside the metal box beneath the table. The same box his father had hidden years ago. Then they heard voices. Above them, men walking, searching. Daniel and Richard stayed in silence. The entrance door opened. Footsteps moved through the tunnel. Slow, careful. Someone was coming closer. Daniel could hear his own heartbeat. Then a voice echoed. We know you're down here. A pause. We just want to talk. Daniel looked at Richard. They both knew that was not true. The footsteps stopped outside the room. A shadow appeared, then disappeared. Minutes passed. Finally, the voices moved away. The men left, but the danger remained, because now Daniel knew the swamp was not just a forgotten piece of land. It was something people were willing to fight for. The next morning, Daniel returned to town. But everything felt different. The same streets, the same buildings, the same people, yet Daniel no longer saw the swamp as a mystery. He saw it as a responsibility. He opened his repair shop early. But instead of fixing machines, he sat at his father's old chair. The notebook rested on the table. He thought about selling for a moment. The money would solve so many problems: his struggling business, his debts, his uncertain future. But every time he imagined walking away, he saw his father standing beside that swamp, protecting something nobody else understood. Daniel made a decision. He would not sell, he would not hide, he would bring people together. But that choice created a new problem, because protecting the swamp required money, research, people, time. And Daniel had none of those things. He had an old repair shop, a broken truck, and a piece of land everyone believed was worthless. Still, he started. He invited local scientists. He spoke with the town. He showed them what his father discovered. At first, people laughed. Then they saw the evidence. Slowly, opinions began changing. The same people who once called him foolish started asking questions. Farmers offered help. Young people volunteered. Researchers arrived. For the first time, the swamp was not alone. But just when Daniel thought things were finally moving forward, a letter arrived. No return address. No name. Only one sentence written on the front. You have no idea what you just uncovered. Daniel opened it. Inside was a photograph of his father standing beside the swamp. But he was not alone. Next to him was someone Daniel had never seen before, someone who changed everything, because written on the back of the photograph were 4 words, "Ask your mother." And Daniel realized there was a part of his father's story he had never known. The photograph stayed on Daniel Carter's table all night. He did not sleep. He sat in the quiet repair shop, surrounded by old machines and unfinished projects, staring at the image under the weak yellow light. His father, the swamp, and the person standing beside him. A person Daniel had never seen before. The words on the back kept repeating in his mind. Ask your mother. But Daniel's mother had been gone for years, and the questions he carried now had nowhere to go. By sunrise, Daniel was already driving. The road was empty. Morning fog covered the fields. His hands gripped the steering wheel as memories came back. His mother rarely talked about his father's work. Whenever Daniel mentioned the swamp, she changed the subject. When he asked about the old notebook, she told him to let the past rest. At the time, Daniel thought she simply didn't understand. Now he wondered if she knew everything. He arrived at his childhood home. The house looked smaller than he remembered. The paint was faded. The front steps were older, but inside everything felt familiar. The old clock on the wall, the wooden table where he ate dinner, the corner where he used to leave his school bag. Daniel walked slowly through the rooms. Then he found what he was looking for, an old wooden box in the closet. Inside were letters, photographs, and another notebook, not his father's, his mother's. Daniel opened it carefully. The first pages were simple memories, family moments. small details. But near the end, he found something that stopped him. A letter written 25 years earlier to Thomas Carter. Daniel read it slowly. His mother had known about the swamp, she knew about the discovery, she knew Thomas wanted to protect it, but she also knew something else. Thomas was afraid, not of the land, not of the people who wanted to buy it. He was afraid that if the secret became public, people would destroy what made it special, so he hid the truth. He waited. He believed one day someone with patience would find it. Daniel closed his eyes. His entire life he thought his father left behind unfinished work. But now he understood. His father left behind a test. A question, would someone choose responsibility over reward? Daniel returned to the swamp, but this time he did not go alone. The town came with him. The same people who once laughed now carried tools. Farmers helped rebuild damaged areas. Scientists studied the plants. Young volunteers created walking paths. The swamp slowly became something different. Not a place people avoided, a place people protected, but the biggest challenge was still ahead. The companies that wanted the land were not giving up. Legal battles began, arguments started, people questioned whether Daniel had the right to stop development. For months, Daniel fought, not with anger, not with revenge, with patience. He showed documents, research, history. Proof that the swamp was worth more alive than destroyed. Then one morning the final decision came. The land would be protected, the swamp would remain. Daniel stood outside the old house when he heard the news. The wind moved through the trees, the water reflected the sky. For a moment he felt the same feeling he had as a child standing beside his father, peace. Years later the swamp became a place people traveled to see. Researchers visited. Families walked along the wooden paths. Children learned about nature. And Daniel's repair shop changed too. It became more than a place for fixing machines. It became a place where young people learned skills, where old tools found new purpose, where forgotten things were given another chance. One evening, Daniel returned to the deepest part of the swamp. The sun was setting, orange light touched the water, the grass moved gently in the wind. He carried the old metal box with him. The same box his father gave him decades ago. He opened it. Inside was the notebook, the photograph, and the small wooden key. Daniel smiled, because the key was never meant to open a door. It was meant to open his eyes. He placed everything back inside. Then he left the box open beside him. For years, he believed his father's greatest discovery was hidden beneath the swamp, but he finally understood. The greatest discovery was what the swamp taught him. Value is not always found in what people want to take. Sometimes it is found in what people are willing to protect. Daniel looked across the water, the same water everyone once ignored, the same land everyone called worthless, the same place that changed his life forever. And as the evening became quiet, he remembered the words his father once told him. Never throw something away just because you don't understand its value. Because sometimes the things the world forgets are the things that matter most. If this story reminded you that patience, purpose, and kindness can reveal hidden value, share it with someone who needs that message.